Today we're talking about email designs. So when it comes to email designs, the better your emails look and the more optimized they are for conversions, obviously the more people you're going to convert into buyers, the more money you're going to make, and ultimately the more in tune your email marketing will look with your branding, which is really important for building trust with customers and ultimately just turning them into lifelong customers that stay with us for a long time and continue giving us money. So let's dive into that. Let's go into the doc. So my agency has made our clients over $10 million, again, solely from email and SMS marketing. So this, what you're about to see, is a compilation of all the best design principles within email marketing that we've learned while generating all that revenue and regularly making, on average, over a third of our clients' revenue for them every month. So we have a few main sections of this. The first one is just general elements. Then we got important best practices. We're going to go over hero sections, product sections, and infographics. Let's get started. And real quick before I get into it, I just want to let you know this is going to be extremely practical. This is not going to be like some high-level theoretical design stuff. Everything in this is extremely practical. So starting off with general elements, first up we have text. So first up, obviously, you want to make sure that the font that you're using in your email marketing matches the fonts that you're using on your website or any other like branded assets that you use. You also want to make sure that if you're using like headlines, subheaders, body copy, a lot of brands will kind of separate that out based on what type of text it is. So you want to make sure that all of those principles from the website, or again, any other branded assets you have, are carried over to the email marketing. Now, when it comes to the headlines within emails, you want to make sure that your headlines are formatted in a way where they really pop out and they stand out. And on top of that, they should be very clear and easy to read. So when I say the headlines should be bold, I don't necessarily mean like literally bold text. I just mean like bold as in it should pop out, it should stand out, it should be very easy to like glance at and read right away. So a good example of this is this email from Beast Health, where as you can see, it's very simple, but the headline just sticks out. Now, do I think this is like a super clean headline? No. But again, like it just sticks out, it's easy to read, it blends in with the image, it's clean. Okay, so now let's look at a bad example. A bad example would be this email from Ice Beanie, where, you know, it's not bad, it's just like this doesn't pop out to you. You know, like this line here, this subheader, is a bit hard to read. Same with the body copy, it's just like, it's a super light font, it just doesn't look great. Even the headline, first of all, the copy isn't good, but on top of that, it's just, it doesn't pop out to you. You know, it just kind of blends in, it looks pretty generic and standard. So we want to avoid doing that. That's kind of like the mindset you want to carry with the text. Now, when it comes to buttons, you want to make sure that there's a few like very basic principles to follow here. So the buttons should be large. We've always found when we split test it, the larger a button is, the better it performs. Now, we're not going to go against the branding and make some like outrageously gigantic button that just takes up the whole screen, but you want the button to look big. You know, it should not be a tiny button. So one good example is this one. That button's pretty large, it stands out, and the color of it pops off the rest of the email. Whereas this email here, you can see the button's tiny, like you'd miss the button if you weren't looking for it, essentially. So we want to avoid that. And again, like the color should pop out from the rest of the email. And then in your email, because the next point here, you want to have at least 2 to 3 buttons in every email, or CTAs, buttons, same thing. And so if I was looking at your email from a zoomed out view, I should be able to easily see the buttons, like they should all pop out. For example, in this email, this isn't the whole email, obviously, but if we were to zoom out and look at the whole thing, every button would be that bright green, which matches the brand's branding, and it also just pops up off that email just because of the way it's designed. Also, very crucial, especially in e-commerce, you almost always want to have a button above the fold. So what do I mean by that? Above the fold means whatever someone sees as soon as they open your email, that's the above the fold section. Once they start scrolling, now you get to below the fold. Okay, so above the fold, we always want to have a button and a clear value proposition. I'm not going to get into the copywriting because that's for a separate video. This is specifically for the design, but you want to almost always include a button up there in that hero section. Really the only times you wouldn't is obviously if it's a plain text email, you wouldn't, or if it's some email where they have to continue reading in order for it to make sense for them to click, that's another situation where you probably wouldn't include it. But for the most part, emails are a very like curiosity-based thing, so we want to give them an option to click and see the message in the offer or the whatever the message is of that email in the header section and get an instant opportunity to click and advance on. All right, so moving on to transitions. So you can use a lot of different elements to separate sections out and kind of act as a transition. but you want to try to stay away from very generic looking gradients, for example, unless they fit within the branding nicely. So like a gradient is a great example of something that everyone will just use as a transition. But like in most cases, especially in my opinion, they just don't look that clean and they definitely don't match the branding. Like for example, if we were to go to a random website like Nike.com, you would probably notice that they just don't have a bunch of, gradients everywhere. I mean, like they might have some here and there. But like, look, we're on the website right now, we're looking around. I don't see like gradients, so like I wouldn't use a gradient if I was designing an email for Nike. And in an ideal world, you want to have no transitions at all by just keeping the background clean and fresh throughout the whole email. So like one good example of that is you'll see emails where the background is white, but there are a lot of different like pieces of imagery and PNG that kind of pop up throughout it. Here's a good example of that, where this email has that like cream white colored background, and that just flows throughout the whole email and doesn't really get disrupted at all. Everything's just kind of overlaid on top of it. So there really isn't even a need for transitions, even though you still kind of see them with the product here, for example. And you almost always want to avoid blocky sections that are super basic, where a transition doesn't even exist. So let's look at the quick good example here. So this one you can see like they use the milk to act as the transition here, and that smoothly takes you from this orange section to this white section, pretty clean. This Dr. Squatch email, they kind of have like the ground kind of, and so like this is borderline a gradient, but it looks so natural the way it's made, where it just kind of flows right into that like darker section below it. That's a really clean transition, for example. This is a bad example where, as you can see, it's just blocky sections like this. It doesn't look good. We don't want to have just basic transitions like that. This looks so much cleaner and looks a lot more engaging as well. So that's kind of like a good example of transitions, because they really can make or break the vibe of the email, which matters a lot when it comes to conversion. All right, this one's huge. Next up is spacing. So all of the spacing in your emails should be very consistent. So that means the space between headlines and subheadlines, the space between a body copy and a button, the space between like the bottom of the buttons and the transition, for example. There's a lot of different little things here. You just want to make sure that everything's spaced out nicely and it's not crammed together and it's not too far apart. And the thing about this is like it kind of just takes a designer's eye to know if a spacing between a certain element and another element is good or not. So you kind of just want to have that feel of like, is there too much space or is there too little space? And if spacing is jacked up everywhere, it really just messes with the reader's eye, and it is likely going to stop people from reading or stop people from looking at whatever isn't on your email, which obviously hurts conversion. Now, in the important best practices section, we're going to go into a principle called white space as well, which is going to directly apply to this. But as the good example here, you can see it's just a clean email. Everything looks very like nice and aesthetic on this, and the spacing is clean. Even though you might argue like this is too close, but like when it comes to all these little elements that they have, it's just nicely spaced and it looks clean. There's no like craziness to it. This, on the other hand, is poorly spaced, where there's pretty much no space here between this button and transition. Just looks awkward. Same thing with that transition, and again, there pretty much isn't a transition there. And this body copy, then the body copy is small, then it's super close to these buttons, and it just all looks like crammed and awkward, which is what we want to avoid. All right, next up, important best practices. Those first few were kind of just like basic principles of emails. Now we want to get into some important best practices. So the first one, this is huge, and this is a very common topic for us that we always like to talk about, which is don't stop the reader's eyes from reading. So the main thing here is you want to cut out boxes as often as you possibly can in your email designs. I'll show you the examples to demonstrate this in a second, but for now, just stick with me. So you don't want to use like a choppy design, meaning you would essentially in a choppy design, you have everything like not flowing whatsoever. So you want everything to flow or use a clean transition, kind of like these transitions that we looked at right here, rather than being cut up by a bunch of like straight lines and boxy sections. Because when a reader's eye is going through the email, it's trained to stop when they see like a sharp cut or a line, or if it's not a clean transition. So we want to avoid those, essentially, is what I'm trying to articulate to you. And then the third point here is so like any designs that have boxes or choppy designs, whatever that is, it just naturally tells the reader's eyes to stop. And so when you do that, obviously they're going to stop reading and they're less likely to convert unless they click. So that's the importance of this. Now let's look at a couple examples. So this one, it's a little bit small for you there. Let me blow it up a bit. But as you can see, this email just kind of smoothly goes through, and it's just a clean transition all the way through. You don't really see any boxes other than like these ones down here with these little pieces of text in it. But other than that, like other than the buttons, there's really no boxes other than the literal cereal boxes themselves, which is nice. It all just kind of flows through and the transitions are clean all the way through. Here's another example from Strong Coffee where you can see there is technically the box here, but that's more of like a banner with a scrolling GIF. That's kind of different. And yeah, they technically do have this box here, but as you can see, it still just kind of flows. Like this little wave with the imagery kind of like inhabited within it, it just all flows together. And that's kind of like what you want to aim for. On the other hand, you have kind of a bad example here where there's just like cut, subheader, cut by this box, another box with the image in it, another box for the review, bad spacing here. It's just not clean. You know, it just doesn't look good whatsoever. So you want to avoid that when it comes to the way you lay out your emails. All right, so next up is imagery. Now, quick disclaimer, do not use images from other sources that you do not own or like other, assets, websites, whatever. This can get you in trouble and cost you a lot more money than it's actually worth. So just word of caution, do not do that. Next, though, we'll actually get into the principles here. So you can use AI like ChatGPT to help create backgrounds, transitions, all that type of stuff. But you do not want to use it for product images. It's going to jack it up. It's also going to jack up like people's faces if you want to use it for faces, unless you're creating an AI person out of nothing. But it's going to mess up your product images if you use it as of now, as of the time of me recording this. So other AI tools that are super important for imagery is Canva. So Canva AI has an image extender so that if you have an image that's this big, for example, and you want it to add on this part so that you can fit like text up there, for example, you can extend it using Canva AI's image extender, which is super helpful for us. Canva also has an image enhancer. So if you have an image that's low quality or just not as high quality as you want it to be, so like if you zoom in, it just doesn't look good, you can use their image enhancer to make that stuff just look a lot higher quality while still making it look the exact same as it did. So here we got a couple, an example of a good use of imagery where it's lifestyle, it's good for it's good for the product. It shows the product in use. And here's a bad example where the product it's literally just a product. It's very basic and it's not really used in a good way. And originally I thought this was in here, but I just added it in. You want to make sure that you use lifestyle imagery as often as possible, or show the product in use. So that's why this Huel email is a good example, while this one isn't. It shows the person actually having the product and like the setting that they would be in, that the setting that the reader could relate to. But when you just throw the product out here by itself, it has a lot less emphasis and it's a lot less like relatable. All right, so really simple one here, headers. So this is the little like logo at the top of the email. We do not want to put categories or sections at the top of this like a lot of brands do, because that distracts from the core message of the email and it's just giving them like other options that are just distracting them. You want to just have a clean logo. You can either have a background specifically behind that logo or just overlay the logo on top of the email design itself. And then if you're going to use like a banner, or some people call it an eyebrow, you just put that on the top with whatever text that you're going to put in there. So good example here is Dr. Squatch. You can see they just have the logo embedded within the email. Super clean, super basic. Bad example here, they had a GIF and then they had like social icons and then there's all this space and they had collections. Just not a good idea. This kills your conversions. It's just not good. It just doesn't look good. All right, next up we got white space. So this does not literally mean that the extra space is white. It simply means that there's a healthy amount of space surrounding elements. So best example here is Apple's advertising. As you can see, Apple's advertising just always looks clean, and it always just looks like aesthetic. This is the reason. They have good, healthy white space around everything. Just look at these two ads here, for example. A terrible example of this is Old Navy's emails. We like to clown on them all the time on our team, because look at, like, your eyes are just shocked looking at this. You don't know what to look at. It's very busy. So that's a great what you should do and what you shouldn't do when it comes to using white space within an email. Next up, we got matching the branded elements. So you essentially want to take the elements from the website and replicate those in the marketing emails. That's what gives the brand like a consistency and a congruency when you're showing up in people's inbox. And some examples of those elements would include things like buttons, transitions, the fonts like we talked about earlier, the headline, subheader, body copy styles, similar to what we talked about earlier, and the ways that imagery is actually used. And again, like we talked about, if the brand doesn't use gradients, we shouldn't just throw a bunch of gradients in the email. You know, it's a bad way to create, that's a great way to create incongruent emails from the actual branding. All right, so next up with GIFs. So it's really good to include little subtle GIFs all the time because they instantly make the email kind of come alive. But you only want to use them in a helpful way. You don't want to like waste them and just put them there just because they do take up more weight than an image. And so they don't look as good to spam filters, but they can be very helpful in terms of conversions. So like one example is if the GIF kind of displays a process like a before and an after, for example, that's a great use of a GIF, or like a box opening and then showing the contents of the box, like the products or whatever that is. That's a good example of when to use a GIF. If the GIF displays like different options, like maybe you have 3 different flavors of the same product, that's a good chance to like use a GIF to mix that up. Or if the GIF displays something like an emotion, like these are just ballpark or like random examples that I'm giving you here. So like let's say you have 2 different people like popping, like one showing up and the other one, they're both smiling, whatever it is. There's a lot of different ways you can use GIFs. Just again, make sure that they actually have a use and that they're there for a reason. They're not just putting it there just to have a GIF, essentially. All right, next up, hero sections. So you want to always include a button above the fold in your hero section, similar to what I talked about earlier. You always want to have a clear and bold headline that's easy to read, again, like I talked about earlier. And then any other text, like a subheader body, should also be easy to read. It's very common, I'd say, for the headline to be big and bold, but then all the rest of the text is hard to read. You want to avoid that at all costs. And then as for the imagery in the hero section, this is something that a lot of brands get wrong, is you want to make sure the imagery actually shows what people care about in respect to what that email is about. So for example, you wouldn't show a bottle of a supplement, right? People don't care about the bottle of the supplement. They care about what that supplement will do for them. So for example, if it's an inflammation supplement, I'm not going to show the bottle. I mean, maybe I'll have the bottle in there, but I'm going to include an image of a woman walking outside smiling because her joints are finally feeling good, for example. You wouldn't show the t-shirt. You would show the person that the reader wants to become wearing the t-shirt. Another good example. So like this example of Dr. Squatch here, even this, like it's not necessarily showing the like use of the product. Obviously, Dr. Squatch is still going to have good converting emails because they just have a strong brand. But they are still presenting the products in a nice aesthetic way, and they have the hand holding it, which helps as well. But again, if you can and when you can, include that lifestyle imagery and show the product actually in use, or show the result of the product that the people actually care about. Now, a bad example here of a hero section. This is actually a real hero section from an email. And yeah, it's Post Malone on a horse. So not much else to say about that. All right, next up, we're going to talk about product sections. So in most cases, your product sections should have a subheader, a product imagery, like some type of image for the product or it being in use, kind of like we were just talking about, a brief description of the product, a review, and a button. These aren't all necessary, but they're all just different elements that are important to consider when it comes to building out a strong product section. If you're using a review, it's always good to put the 5 stars in there. There's a nice little visual aid for that. And these should not look super basic and generic with just like one image, one button, and maybe even the price. You don't want to do that. It doesn't look good. It's very lazy email marketing. If you're going to highlight products, highlight the reason someone would actually buy it, or like examples of people finding success with that product. So a good example here, you can see in this product section, they have the reviews, a picture of someone actually using it, the 5 stars, the little title, and a button. And it's just laid out in a super nice aesthetic way. And even like this, just like with the little waffle, stroop waffle, whatever they're called, with the little bite out of it, even that is nice as well. And then here's a bad example where literally all they have is just the flowers with the price and the button. It's very basic, it's very simple. And you know, like it can work because of the product is a flower, so it's like it just kind of depends on how they look for the most part. But again, like you're gonna get higher conversions if you actually lay it out in a nice way that's helpful for the reader like this. All right, last but not least, we got infographics. So you want to use infographics to make a body of text easier to digest and conceptualize, and also to make the email just like overall easier to look at and digest and again, conceptualize. Now, if you use an infographic and it makes the email harder to read because like it just doesn't make sense what you're doing, then it's doing more harm than good. You should take the information or the context in the text and make it an easy to understand visual. So a great example of this is this email right here, where they have this little stat, like over 80% of pups have some form of dental disease by age 3, and they put it within this circle where it's showing like the 80% filled in. That's a strong, simple, nice looking infographic that just makes the email easier to conceptualize. And as for the bad example, this is an email where they have like this morning intention, rest transition ritual, evening reflection, and it's all just text. They could have easily turned this into some type of infographic with like little, images and graphics and sections and icons that would have made this a lot more engaging and easier to digest and read, but instead it's just blocks of text with lines between them, and it just doesn't work out very well. So with that being said, hope you found this valuable. I'm going to give you an opportunity to grab this document so that you can reference it in the future or give it to your email team or whatever that is. And all you gotta do is hit the top link in the description. You're gonna hit that, it'll give you a quick opt-in page, jump in my email list to send you a bunch of valuable emails, and you'll get that doc completely free, and you'll have free access to it whenever you want. Other than that, I got my whole course on email and SMS marketing popping up on the screen right here. If you got any questions, drop in the comments, like, subscribe, all that. See you in the next one. Peace.